Prologue. Before we dive into the subject matter ahead, we will have a look at the attitudes that underpin the various aspects of this book. The first one is an attitude of self-reliance. This book should be read as a declaration of independence. More than anything, it is about encouraging you to have a critical mindset and create your own independent view of things. Also about this book. Secondly, the book is about moving away from an attitude of scarcity to an attitude of abundance, weaving through the different aspects of our lives. Go your own way. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Robert Frost. There's one thing I really want to encourage you to do. Start carving your own path. Do not just take the road less traveled, as Frost says, but make a new road and live a life that is truly yours. If you want to change the world, you have to be able to overcome your fear of facing the unknown and ignore the pessimists, critics, and naysayers. If a new society is to come, it has to be one where people do not follow what others tell them to do. It ought to be a society where people feel free to go for their own passion and interests, take up responsibility for their own lives, and as the 19th century philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson put it, nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your own mind. The qualities we will need for this are consciousness, responsibility, courage, hope, and trust. This book should also be read with the very same attitude. It should not be followed blindly, but rather be seen as a source of inspiration for you to imagine a new path for yourself. Ingredients for independence. I would like you, reader of the book, to read it with a critical mind. If something does not resonate with you, go and do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Start your own journey. I've included plenty of references which can assist you in your own research. Do not be afraid to think out of the box and come to entirely different conclusions. If we want to live our own authentic lifestyle, we will have to take responsibility for the choices we make. There exists a trend in our world today to give away responsibility of our lives to the institutions of society. We do what society expects of us. For example, give birth in a hospital and send our children to school. If this does not turn out well, we won't have to feel responsible since we just did what everyone else was doing. We can always blame society. However, if we decide to give birth naturally or support the natural learning of our children, we will have ourselves to blame if things go wrong. In addition, we risk being shamed and frowned upon by those around us. Therefore, we will need courage. If we do things differently, we will have to be able to withstand the doubts and criticism of others and of ourselves. Emerson writes, "For nonconformity, the world whips you with its displeasure. So we must take a firm stance for what we believe in and do it wholeheartedly. Many of us are afraid to do this. When we follow what everyone else is doing, it is often out of fear. We lack the courage to be different. We are afraid to fail, and therefore we are reluctant to try new things. We have to live a life based on hope, not on fear. We will reap as we sow. We end up manifesting what we believe in and work for." Henry David Thoreau, a friend of Emerson and fellow writer, decided at one point in his life to go against the stream and live simple, solitary life in the woods. He puts it very beautifully. If one advances confidently in the direction of his dream and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. He will put some things behind, will pass an invisible boundary. New, universal, and more liberal laws will begin to establish themselves around and within him, and he will live with the license of a higher order of beings. And so lastly, you will need trust. If you choose your own path, the destination will be uncertain. If you do what everyone else does, you will sacrifice some of your freedom, but you will get a certain security. You will go to school, get a degree, a steady job, a medical insurance, a pension plan, a retirement home, and so on. You will know more or less where you will end up. That is where everyone else ends up. If you choose to create your own way, the outcome of your choices is less certain. You're taking a new road, or a road less traveled by. If you do not school your children, rely on gift economy, and so on, you will not have a clear map of where you're going. There will have to be a lot of trust, and things will be all right. And these principles are guiding you to where you need to go. Off the beaten track. In 1998, my wife and I visited India for the first time. We traveled all the way from the south to north, but we decided to go off the beaten track. We took a travel guide of the country and decided not to go to any places that was mentioned in this travel guide. We called it Travel Guide Negative Planning. We did not go to any tourist places, yet we had the most amazing experience. We avoided all the nuisance of tourist places like busy crowds, pushy vendors, or people trying to overcharge you for their services. Instead, we had lunch with local people, stayed in their homes, and worked their farms. It might well have been the most beautiful trip of our lives. I hope this book can encourage you to go to places you might never have thought of going, and that you may find this surprisingly rewarding. This book is the result of my and my family's journey up to now and the insights I have gained from it. It sure was a bumpy ride, and still is a lot of the time. Yet ultimately, it is definitely worth it. In order to live a truly fulfilling life, we must create our own path. And if I have one wish for you, is that you all may live deeply fulfilling lives. Abundance or scarcity? It's a mystery to me. We have agreed with which we have agreed, and you think you have to want more than you need. Until you have it all, you won't be free. Eddie Vedder. One of the key themes in this book will be the contrast between abundance and scarcity. Many of the things that go wrong in today's world originates out of the feeling of scarcity. This feeling seems to be deeply rooted in the way we think, and gives rise to many of our psychological problems. A lot of people just feel they do not have enough. They do not feel safe. They are afraid they might run out. This keeps them looking after their own interests and competing for resources. You can see these dynamics at play very well in our economic system. If you live from an attitude of abundance, though you may feel you have more than enough, you can freely share your resources. You are confident that life will take care of you. A healthy society, therefore, should try and cultivate a feeling of abundance. Wants versus needs. These feelings of abundance and scarcity are created entirely in our own heads. You can have an income of 500 euros a month and feel that you have enough. Or you can have an income of 10,000 euros a month and still not feel satisfied. You can fly economy class and think you are the richest person on the planet. But some people fly business, yet they are upset because they do not own a private jet. I myself spent all my savings on Sadhana forest. I still remember the day I emptied my savings account, about half a year into the project. I thought this would be a really difficult moment. I thought I would feel afraid and would wonder how I would survive. Yet I felt so happy. I did not have to worry about that money anymore. I was free. Let me tell you a story. Before starting Sadhana Forest, I was managing a medical device company. So I used to do job interviews. At the time, there was a big demand for engineers in companies. As there were not many engineers available in the market, whenever engineers would come for an interview, they would already have a few offers from other companies. So they would try and bargain with me in order to get a better offer. A few times, rather than asking them what minimum wage they wanted, I asked them what the maximum was they were willing to earn. If they were asking for minimum 6,000 euros per month, I asked them if they were willing to accept 100,000 euros. Was there any limit to their asking? And then I went on asking them how much they were willing to commit for that kind of money. If I doubled their wage, would they work double hours? And if I tripled it, would they be willing to be my slave 24 hours a day? This got them really confused. You cannot imagine the looks I got. People thought I was crazy. They would accept any offer. There was no limit to their asking, and neither was there a limit to the extent they were willing to sell themselves. They would do anything for the right amount of money. They would even sacrifice their freedom. However, this made some of them really think. It opened their eyes. Our society has got us confusing our needs and our wants. With needs, I mean what we need in order to survive and live a healthy life. And wants, I define as the things we desire but do not really need. This confusion comes out of the prevailing feeling of scarcity. If we wake up in the morning feeling we do not have enough, we will try to satisfy our every craving, thinking we really need all the things we want. It may seem like a paradox, but a feeling of scarcity will stimulate our greed. If, on the other hand, we wake up in the morning feeling abundant, we will only try to get what we need, and we will be content with less. In Oroville, the universal township where I live, there is an amazing project called Pour Tous, for everyone in French, distribution center. It is a food cooperative where all the members pay a fixed amount per month. In return, they can take whatever they need from the shop. There are no price tags on anything, so when you leave the shop, you do not know how much you spent and whether you have taken goods beyond the value of your monthly contribution or not. This makes people really think about what is a real need and what is merely a want. The economics of scarcity. The feeling of scarcity is the foundation of our economic system. Modern-day economy takes scarcity of resources and unlimited wants as its starting point. It argues that all wants cannot possibly be met because resources are limited. Therefore, humans are forever in a state of scarcity, trying to maximize what they can achieve with their limited resources. Economist Lionel Robbins famously wrote, "Scarcity of means to satisfy given ends is an almost ubiquitous condition of human behavior." Economics is the science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means. Recent studies even show that economic education increases students' greed. We will further discuss the scarcity and competition embedded in our economic system in Chapter 5 and 6. Because of this emphasis on scarcity, our economy always has to keep growing. Progress is defined in terms of growth of gross domestic product, GDP. GDP is a total production of a country. If GDP rises, we are producing more. So an increase in GDP just means that people feel a greater scarcity and their wants have increased. If people would feel abundance, the GDP would go down every year because people would realize they need less and less. But if you want the GDP to grow, you have to stimulate this feeling of scarcity and make people follow their wants and not their needs. As psychologist Paul Watchell notes, an economy primarily driven by growth must generate discontent. We cannot be content or the entire economic machine would grind to a halt. So growth in GDP does not mean we are better off at all. Simon Kuznets, the inventor of GDP himself, already warned us about this. What is good for GDP is not necessarily good for us. And in fact, many alternative indicators for welfare have been proposed. Take war, for instance. War is fantastic for GDP. It makes you produce huge amounts of resources that are consumed at a very high rate. Bombs, fuel, tanks. The same thing goes for cancer. Cancer comes with huge expenses on research, machines, and chemotherapy. War and cancer make us produce lots more. And in that way, they drive the economy. In fact, it would be much better for GDP if you would be in hospital or in a war zone right now, instead of reading this book. The latter contributes very little to GDP. And why do we have a war in the first place? Again, out of this feeling of scarcity. One group feels that they do not have enough land or resources, so they try to conquer their neighbors' lands and resources. Another way is possible though. There are societies that do not seem to be subject to such feelings of scarcity. Ancient hunter-gatherer societies lived with minimal material comfort. People often call them primitive. Yet in his famous essay, The Original Affluent Society, anthropologist Marshall Sahlins argues that these communities probably experience more abundance than we do. Hunter-gatherers group could meet basic needs for food and shelter with only a few hours of work per day, effectively allowing everyone to experience abundance. Another illustrious example comes from Ladakh. Ladakh is a mountainous area in the Indian Himalayas. Until the mid-70s of the past century, Ladakh has hardly been influenced by Western industrialized society. People lived in small agricultural communities as they had done for the past centuries. Researcher Helena Norberg Hodge arrived in Ladakh in 1975 and saw the rapid change in Ladakhi culture and environment after Ladakh was opened up to tourism and started undergoing a rapid process of urbanization and so-called progress. In her book, Ancient Futures, she tells the story of a Ladakhi's development. Norberg Hodge recounts how there was a sense of abundance in the people when she first arrived there. During her first visit, a local villager told her there was no poor people in his village. Just 8 years later, she saw the same villager laminating to some foreign tourists how poor the Ladakhi were. She even heard a development commissioner say, "If Ladakh is going to be developed, we have to figure out how to make these people more greedy." You just can't motivate them otherwise. His case seems to be clear. Development and a westernized society go hand in hand with a feeling of scarcity and greed. The way towards abundance. So where does this feeling of scarcity come from? And how do we develop a mind of abundance? This is the question this book will revolve around. Scarcity develops because for so many of us, from early age onwards, our needs are not fulfilled. The innate expectations we have as a species are not met. This leaves us feeling unsafe and insecure. It creates in us an emptiness we fruitlessly try to fill up for the rest of our lives with things like money, sex, fame, or drugs. But no amount of those can ever be enough to fill up the emptiness we feel. Our society keeps glorifying the most famous and wealthy people. But are they really better off? It is a cliche as old as time, but money cannot buy happiness. In fact, it might lead us to the contrary. Materialistic and consumerist tendencies seem to be on the rise in our society as we become more and more wealthy. This can leave us unfulfilled and just leads us to spend more. Psychological research shows that as we grow wealthier, we soon get accustomed to our new level of wealth. This principle has been called hedonic adaptation. We do generally not grow happier as we get richer, neither on the personal nor on a national level. Beyond an income level that meets basic needs, there is no correlation between material wealth and emotional well-being. External factors only account for about 10% of our happiness. Our mental and emotional well-being is much more dependent on our state of mind. If we grow up in an environment that fulfills all the genetic expectations of the continuum, we will feel content and abundant, safe and confident. We will not feel the need to keep accumulating resources. Psychologist Tim Kessler writes, "When people experience situations that do not support the satisfaction of their basic psychological needs, the resultant feeling of insecurity may lead them to adopt a more materialistic outlook on life as a way to compensate for these feelings. And this tendency is especially heightened under the current climate of cultural consumerism. Research indicates, for example, that children in erratic environments grow up to be more greedy and self-centered than those who grow up in a warm and caring families. The goal of this book is to try and describe the factors that can contribute to this feeling of abundance. How do we create a community or society where children can grow feeling secure and adults can feel emotionally stable and happy, freely sharing what they have without needing to compete with each other?" Depression and mental disorders on the rise. We are living in a time of unparalleled material wealth in the global north. Yet at the same time, we are increasingly unhappy and lonely. Psychologists talk about a crisis of modern psyche. Could it be that our current way of living is setting us up for misery? Already in the 1950s, psychoanalyst Erich Fromm considered modern Western society to be fundamentally pathological. The prevailing feeling of scarcity seems to lead millions of people worldwide into psychological problems and depression. Let us have a look at the numbers. People seem to be more and more affected by negative emotions worldwide. More than 1 in 3 experience stress and worry on a daily basis. 1 out of 5 experience a mental disorder any given year. And 3 out of 10 experience one in their lifetime already. Mental disorders account for 1/5 to almost 1/3 of all years lived with disability. Rates are higher and rising in higher income countries. Some studies estimate that in the US, nearly half of the population will suffer from a psychological disorder in their life, and in the EU, nearly 40% any given year. Long-term studies on American high school and college students show a 5 times increase in mental health issues between the middle and the end of the 20th century. Depression is now considered to be the leading cause of disability worldwide by the World Health Organization, WHO. More than 300 million people worldwide suffer from it. An added 260 million people live with anxiety disorders. The percentage of the world population suffering from depression has grown 10% since 1990, and it is again higher in higher income countries. The OECD reports the consumption of antidepressants in its member states doubled between 2000 and 2015. In the US alone, 11% of the population over 12 years old are taking antidepressant drugs. The worldwide antidepressant market is valued at $13.75 billion, which is the same as the GDP of the entire country of Mongolia. And the market is projected to grow even further. Moreover, around 800 million people a year die through suicide, and suicide is the second leading cause of death among 15 to 29-year-olds worldwide. Again, suicide rates are substantially higher in high-income countries. When Helena Norberg Hodge would explain to Ladakhi villagers that in the West, many people were so unhappy that they had to see a doctor, their mouths would drop open and they would stare in disbelief. She describes Ladakhi people as being generally happy and content. Of course, this is only anecdotal evidence. As historian Yuval Noah Hariri points out, there has been no consistent research on the history of happiness. There seems to be an assumption in our society, as technology and material welfare improve, our happiness grows accordingly. Yet there is no real proof that this is actually the case. The example of the dak shows that it may go both ways. In any case, there is no other species on the planet today that shows that the kind of depressed behavior we see in the large numbers in Western society today. This indicates that something has gone wrong in our development. Is our modern society the niche that we evolved to live in? Are we meant to spend most of our waking days behind a desk, exposed to artificial lighting, going home to watch TV or play with our smartphones? Modern civilizations fail to satisfy profound needs in men, to say it with Erica Fromm. These unmet needs are what we will look into in the present book.
This is Orville Radio, Voices from the City of Dawn.